Hey guys, this is Matt Long again, co-owner of the Second Mile Group at eXp Realty. This is another one of our 101 level purchase offer forms type classes. This one we're going to go over the buyer contingency addendum. This is one that you're going to know about when you're writing your purchase offer. So just by way of reminder, once you get logged in here to your file, the way you incorporate this to your purchase offer is you pull up, when you're filling out your purchase contract, you know this is going to be, this form's going to come into play, so it's very easy to incorporate it. You don't need to do any fancy verbiage. Just right here on section 1F, there's multiple different addendums you can incorporate with the click of a button. So boom, clicked. Now the buyer contingency addendum is a part of this transaction. So straightforward, easy to incorporate. If you were trying to incorporate this after writing the offer, it'd be nearly impossible. So definitely you want to do this one up front. Then you come up to the transaction forms, you select the buyer contingency addendum. Pretty straightforward document. It can also be a pretty confusing document. So we'll go over kind of the ins and outs on this. It can be used in two different ways, and we'll talk about them as we go. These lines are telling you, because it can be used two different ways, it's outlining which is it going to be. So the following additional terms and conditions are hereby included as a part of the contract between seller and buyer for above referenced premises if marked by an X and initialed by the seller. So that's saying, as you'll see here, I'm going to scroll down, this is contingent upon accepted offer for buyer's property. The other option on this form is contingent upon the closing of buyer's property. And those check boxes they're talking about are these ones right here. Obviously, it's never going to be both of those. It's only going to be one or the other. So we're going to go over the form the way it's written. We're going to start with contingent upon accepted offer for buyer's property. So this contract is contingent on buyer accepting an offer to purchase buyer's real property located at, and their address, no later than, and then you're picking the day here. This we had on here 30 days. So what you're saying here is how many days you want before you accept an offer. So if you're in a market like the one we're in right now, August of 2020, it's really hot, and you're probably going to sell this person's house as long as you price it right. In a week to 10 days, you might even sell it in 7 to 10 hours, just depending on what kind of property they have. So in today's world, you know, you'd put, say, 7 days, August 19th, or you could go more like 10 days, whatever you think is reasonable. You don't want to ask for too much because, you know, the seller might not be very willing to accept something like this depending on the current market conditions. So then we come back and we check this so that we're telling everyone which contingency we have. And it goes on to say, if buyer does not accept an offer on the buyer's property by the date set forth, this contract shall be deemed canceled and earnest money shall be released. So what that means is if you ask for the 21st and on the 20th you don't have an offer yet, you need to be talking to the listing agent of this property that your client is buying and saying, hey, we're going to need more time. Can we get more time? And you don't want to just let that expire. You need to have that conversation. Now, if the buyer does accept an offer within that time frame, you'll deliver all of those documents. We'll get to this later, described in the line 67 to 72 of this document, for the seller to review within 3 days of execution of that accepted offer. So basically everything you accepted there, you're going to send in. And then if you don't deliver the offer documents to the seller within the time frame set forth, the seller would need to cure you to get them. We'll talk about the cure notice later because it doesn't come into play when you're writing an offer. And right now we're just focusing on writing an offer and all the different ways it can be done. These lines 18 and 19 are lines that a lot of people don't really know about. Seller may, within 3 days of receipt of the accepted offer documents, cancel this contract and the earnest money shall be released to buyer. I had this come into play. I was the listing agent. We accepted a contingent offer, gave them a week to get it under contract. They got it under contract in 2 days, sent us all of their purchase information, and the offer that they accepted was contingent. Not only that, the offer that they had accepted was contingent, which meant my buyers would have been fifth in row on all of these contingencies, and they weren't willing to do that. So as the seller of this transaction, they enacted their right, and within 3 days of receipt of those documents, they canceled the purchase offer with this person, returned their earnest money. They hadn't done their inspection yet. They had done their inspection, and my seller felt bad and sent them a check for the cost of the inspection. And the next day we had sold it to someone else who closed cash in like 10 days. So it worked out better for everybody. But be aware of this sentence and be aware that this is a thing that the seller can do. So when you're in this position of accepting offers for buyer who's also a seller, make sure that they're accepting a contract that the seller of the house they're buying is going to be okay with. Hopefully that makes sense. If seller does not cancel this contract within 3 days of receipt, this contract shall become contingent upon the closing of the pending sale of buyer's property by. This is really hard to fill out, right? Because we don't know when it's going to go under contract. We don't know how long the buyer is going to need. But when I write this, I do it 30 days from whatever date I've put up here. So I would do September 21st in this case, which is a Monday, which nobody would like me if we actually had a close date on a Monday. But that's what you're going to put in here. And then if need be, and you can get it agreed to, this can be changed via an addendum. If the pending sale of buyer's property does not close escrow by this date, the contract shall be deemed canceled and the earnest money shall be released to buyer. So if your buyer of Cambridge doesn't close on Main Street by the 21st, the seller of Cambridge can cancel your buyer of Main Street and give them their earnest money back automatically. There's nothing going on, no cures, no anything. It just can happen. If buyer's accepted offer cancels for any reason, buyer shall deliver notice to seller within 3 days that the buyer is canceled. Notice to seller shall state buyer's intentions to either 1. Cancel this purchase, or 2. Proceed by removing the buyer contingency and provide written documentation from the buyer's lender that they can do that. If buyer elects to waive this buyer contingency and proceed with this contract, seller and buyer agree that all other contingencies shall remain, meaning appraisal contingencies, loan contingencies, all the stuff that's defaults in there is going to stay in place. This is also saying that the seller can accept a subsequent backup offer to purchase the premises before buyer has delivered to seller the accepted offer documents. So if you're within those 10 days that you asked for up here and you haven't accepted an offer yet and the seller gets a better offer, they can deliver written notice to your buyer informing them that there's a backup contract. Upon receipt of seller's notice, buyer shall have 3 days to deliver to seller a written notice to remove the contingency. Such notice from the buyer shall include written documentation from the lender that you can close without selling. If it's all cash, evidence of their ability to close escrow, proof of funds, If buyer fails to timely waive this buyer contingency, this contract shall be deemed canceled and the earnest money shall be released to buyer. So in short, this means in these 10 days, if your seller of Cambridge gets an offer that they like better, ideally it would not be contingent, they can tell you, hey, we have a better offer. You've got 3 days to tell us if you're going to move forward and waive this contingency. If you're not, we're going to cancel you and take this other offer. If the buyer elects to waive this buyer contingency and proceed, seller and buyer agree that all other contingencies shall remain. So that's a copycat of this sentence, just making sure all of that normal stuff stays in play. Time periods here. Date of the contract acceptance for the purpose of all applicable contract time periods, excluding opening of escrow and depositing of earnest money, shall be the date of the signed contract is delivered, which would be normal, or 3 days after seller's receipt of buyer's accepted documents, provided that seller does not cancel this contract prior to expiration of the 3-day period. So you're either saying, hey, we're confident we're going to get our house sold, so much so that we're going to start our inspection period at the normal time. Or you're saying, well, I'm not sure about that. We're not willing to risk an inspection. We're not willing to risk any cash outlay beyond the earnest deposit until we have ours sold, so we're going to go with this way. So as you can imagine, right now, August 2020, getting a buyer contingency accepted isn't the easiest thing, so you've got to give up a lot. So right now, you're almost going to have to check this box and make sure your client is aware that they're starting everything and that the seller has all these options that could cancel them, and they are risking their inspection money if they do that. So, overview of this part up here. Basically, you're under contract, you're also not under contract. So you've got to be managing all of this, you've got to get the house sold, you've got to have your clients be super realistic on their list price for Main Street, otherwise they might lose Cambridge. And the offer that you accept, make sure it's something that the seller is going to be willing to accept, and really be in communication with the listing agent constantly about, are they getting other offers, are they open to other offers, know what they're going to try and do in terms of this backup situation. Because odds are, if your buyer is writing their offer on Cambridge contingent, they can't waive it. If they could, why would you be doing all of this? So you just got to make sure you're on top of all of that. So that covers that section. There's a lot to it. Even just the overview took over 10 minutes. So contingent on closing of the buyer's property, this is a different kind of contingency. This is saying that the buyer's already accepted an offer to purchase their property located at Main Street, and good grief, my fingers aren't working very well today. And that the accepted offer documents are attached to this purchase offer. So this is a lot stronger contingency because it's already under contract. And depending on where you are in that process, it gets stronger and stronger. So you're already under contract, which is good. If you're already through your inspection period, BINSRs have been negotiated, that's better. If you're already through your appraisal, that's even better. And if the buyer of the house you're selling is cash, that's better still. So even within this, there's different levels of better. So if the pending sale of the buyer's property does not close, and this you know the close date because hopefully you're their listing agent on this property. And this is saying if it doesn't close, this contract shall be deemed canceled and earnest money released to the buyer. What's nice about this is they're protected all the way up until it closes. And odds are you're going to close on the one you're buying the day after this. So by then, everything has been done and taken care of. So it's kind of an extra layer of protection for your client, which can be nice. Now then, if the offer that you have on here cancels for any reason, buyer shall deliver notice to seller within 3 days of buyer's receipt of cancellation and provide evidence of cancellation. Notice to seller shall state buyer's election to either cancel and get your money back, proceed and remove the contingency. So this time you might be able to remove the contingency because you might be far enough along in other things, or changes have been made, that may put a little less down payment, something like that. So this time you might actually be able to use this, but it all depends on the exact situation. And again, copycat, if they waive the contingency and proceed, all other contingencies remain. And this one just defaults that time periods start per usual at the date that the signed contract is delivered. And then you would have everyone initial here. And I forgot that part up here. For this section, if lines 7 through 47 apply, everyone initials up here. They'd only initial one of the two spots. They'd either initial here if it's that, or they'd initial here if it's this. The rest of this applies to either contingency as described above. So the offer documents, both of these refer to delivering the offer documents. What are those offer documents? It defaults to accepted offer documents to seller, including a copy of all purchase contract documents evidencing the sale, and then if for some reason you had other things to add in here, you would. Like if you felt like the pre-qual, if you felt this verbiage doesn't automatically include the pre-qual, you'd write that here. If buyer fails to timely deliver any notice required by this addendum, seller may issue a cure notice to buyer as required by Section 7A of the contract, and in the event of buyer's breach, seller shall be entitled to earnest money pursuant to Section 7B of this contract. Upon request, buyer shall provide seller with a written update regarding the status of the sale of the buyer's property. And then everybody signs. So as you can see, the buyer contingency addendum is a complex document. There's a lot going on. But if you don't read it and just fill in the few little blanks that are here, you're going to miss a lot about what it's actually saying and what it's actually doing. So that's the brief overview of filling that out, and a little bit of details of how to best use it. So hopefully that was helpful for you. If you have any questions after that, watching this, just reach out to Josh or I, and we'll get you taken care of. All right, see ya.